All right, this morning I just have a little bit to share with you. So by my senior year of high school, I had completed most of my required classes to graduate, so I was able to focus on electives that I really enjoyed, and I loved my English classes. At the time, I wanted to be a high school English teacher, and I took every class I could to increase my knowledge of literature. That's why I got into English, the literature. I had a natural talent for writing, but a properly cited 20-page paper is a lot of work, and it's not fun. Grammar drives me kind of crazy. It's not my favorite either. And here's a little known fact about me. I'm a horrible speller. I used to get questioned all the time, how can you major in English and not know how to spell? It's the 21st century, Janet. There's this thing called spell check. And I'm 42 years old. Why learn how to spell separate, surprised, or truly now? So this leads me to my senior year AP English class with Mr. Budd. And a major part of AP English was, shockingly, reading and writing papers. And that was a breeze for me. However, I did not get an A in the class that first semester, and I got a B. And you know why? Turns out I did need to know some spelling. And we had weekly quizzes out of the book, 30 Days to a More Powerful Vocabulary. I failed almost every quiz. I struggled to learn the vocabulary, and I surely did not know how to spell the words. And in all fairness, I didn't really try. There were words like inopportune, gregarious, macabre, words that I have used in my adult life, but for some reason, 18-year-old Angela could not grasp. But here's the part of the class I want to focus on. In addition to the reading, the writing, and the vocabulary, a major part of this class was participation. Something that wasn't my favorite in high school, college, and honestly still is not my favorite today. I'm pretty much fine with public speaking like this, or talking one-on-one or in small groups, but class sizes around 20 to 30 people, or groups about that size, really aren't my favorite. While I may have had an educated answer, raising my hand in class just wasn't going to happen. And I pretty much only responded if Mr. Budd called on me. Mr. Budd had us read Hamlet and other works out loud in class, and he called on students to read the lines. He never called on me. And he really had me pegged in class as the quiet girl who never participated. I pretty much just sat in class and listened, and to be honest, that was fine with me. After he gave me the B first semester, Mr. Budd actually said to me that he would be shocked if I ever pulled off an A in that class. He had really written me off. Well, if you know me, those sounded like fighting words, and I was up to the challenge to prove him wrong. I was going to get an A in AP English. I started to study my vocab and shockingly started to get some right. I was doing well in all my tests and papers, and I was so close to that A, but it all came down to a final presentation. We had to read a book and do an oral report on it. Now, it was my senior year. There's maybe 1 week left of class, and everybody was completely blowing this presentation off. Everyone except me. And the funny thing is, no one knew that, especially Mr. Budd. It was supposed to be a 10-minute presentation. 3 kids presented a day, and I was presenting last that day. By the time the other 2 students were done, there was about 5 minutes left in class for me to give my presentation. Because we were short on time, I thought Mr. Budd was going to push my presentation to the next class, because how can I give a 10-minute presentation in 5 minutes? But he told me to go ahead. You know why? Because the quiet girl surely isn't going to speak for more than 5 minutes. So I gave my presentation, and I thought I did pretty good. Kids were laughing at the right spots and engaging. I had a bunch of posters and props. I brought in candles and lit them, something that I don't think would be allowed today. I had matches and lighters in class. And I talked way longer than 5 minutes. Class ran over. So when I was done, everyone clapped and quickly started packing up their stuff to get to their next class. But Mr. Budd told me he wanted me to stay after. All my friends were like, ooh, she's in trouble, and really wondered why I had to stay after. And I was wondering too. I really thought I must have just bombed my final presentation and I can kiss that A goodbye. When everyone left, Mr. Budd had me close the door, and he looked me right in the eyes and said, you made me feel like, insert bad word here, today. I could really see that bad grade in the horizon. I was a little freaked out and didn't know how to respond. He continued and told me he owed me an apology. He should have called on me more in class. He should have let me read out loud. He should have interacted more with me. He admitted he had written me off as just being a quiet kid. And he told me that day would change the way he would teach forever. I did an amazing job that day, and I got an A+++ on my presentation. 18-year-old Angela really didn't know how to respond to something like that. I mean, it's not every day your teacher swears at you. But it's interesting that this memory took place 24 years ago, and I can remember every detail, many that I left out, just like it was yesterday. I can still picture him holding up that grading rubric and showing me the A++ on it. You wanna know why? Because it was a formative memory, an event that shaped my life. That day, the quiet kid showed her worth. Don't ever discredit the quiet one. Mr. Budd will never dismiss the quiet kid in his class again. Just because someone isn't bubbly and extroverted doesn't mean they don't have valuable information to share or offer. So this quiet pattern continued most of my younger years and in my 20s and 30s. And I'd always have people say to me, "You're so shy. Speak up. You're so quiet." And people say that like it's a put down, like there's something wrong with me because I'm on the quieter side. Why is it okay for people to say that to me? I'm not socially allowed to go up to a loud person and say, "You have a big mouth," or "You're so loud." And I really had thought I'd outgrown this. But just the other day, I was at a dance mom meeting, and someone said, "Speak up. We want to hear what you think." And I actually thought I had spoken a lot during that meeting. Guess not. Janet was keeping track of my participation points that meeting. What would ever happen to the phrase, "silence is golden"? Have we lost our understanding that it's okay to be quiet at times, that silence can be a virtue? And if you really know me, you know that I'm not that quiet. My husband and daughter can attest to that. Once you know me, I'm a big mouth, as my mom would say. I just tend to be quieter in new situations or larger groups. I am more introverted and 100% being okay being by myself. And I think sometimes we look down on quieter people as Christians because we are supposed to be bold, outgoing champions of our faith. And that is absolutely true, and there are substantial scriptures to support this, but that's not what I'm going to speak about today. There are times we are supposed to be silent and to be quiet. Ecclesiastes 3:7 says there's a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And today I want to share with you some reasons not to discredit the quiet ones and why their silence is really okay. And I have a lot of scriptures to back up this theory and why we should be quiet. First, silence can help us avoid sinning. We need to learn to hold our tongue. Proverbs 10:19 says, "In the multitude of words there wanteth not sin, but he that refraineth his lips is wise." James 1:19, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." Psalm 4:4 in the ESV, "Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent, Selah." Horrible words can come out of our mouths. Just think about all the hurtful things you may have said in anger, things that Jesus considers a sin. Ephesians 5:29 reminds us, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is of good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers." The words that come out of our mouths should be kind. It's like the old saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And that's wise. Don't sin. Don't say foolish things. Proverbs 21:23 says, "Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles." Holding your tongue keeps you away from drama and guards your soul. Running your mouth could just lead to gossip, making up stories, and so on. Proverbs 11:12 in the ESV says, "Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent." And James 3:8, "But the tongue can no man tame. It is unruly evil, full of deadly poison." Verse 10, "Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessings and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be." And verse 13, "Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness and wisdom." All these scriptures tell you to hold your tongue. It will lead you to sin. Do not lose your soul over idle gossip or cursing out the waiter because he forgot to bring you your Diet Coke. If you are quiet, it gives you less opportunity to say things that you shouldn't. Secondly, silence can gain us respect. Job 13:5 states, "Oh, that you would altogether hold your peace, and it should be your wisdom." And I worked at a school where the younger crowd were constantly in the office complaining about every little detail of the day. If you complain about something every day, how can you be taken seriously? I typically clocked in, went to my classroom, worked, and then went home. I don't have time for that stupid drama. I was a 30-something who dropped my kid off at school, went straight to work, got home to get my kid off the bus, and I had literally no time for socialization. Because of my silence, though, when I did choose to speak up, I was taken seriously. My thoughts and opinions were respected. People pay attention when all of a sudden the quiet girl is worked up and has something to say. Ecclesiastes 9:17 says, "The word of a wise man is heard in quiet, more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools." If I go into the office and jump on the bandwagon with the constant complainers, I'm going to look like a cry amongst the fools. If I bring a concern when I'm alone with my boss or during a meeting, they are heard as being wise and taken seriously and respected. There can be wisdom in silence. Proverbs 17:28 says, "Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding." Aimlessly running your mouth makes you look foolish. Sometimes I watch women babble on and on about who knows what, and I have literally thought, she looks like a foolish woman. She has much to do about nothing. Which leads me to 1 Corinthians 14:34. "Let your women keep silent in the churches, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also saith the law." This does not mean that I, as a woman, cannot speak in church. This means women, and this goes for men too, should not be interrupting the preacher in the middle of service to give her own 2 cents or ask a foolish question, as was happening in the church of Corinth at the time. There is a time and a place for that, and it's not in the middle of a church service. Can you even imagine today if Pastor Cordell is preaching and I jump up halfway through the message and just go, "Hey, what's the deal with connect groups?" A wise woman would never do that, and she knows when to speak and when to ask a question. A wise person isn't always silent, but they know when to be. Silence is often associated with intelligence. Abraham Lincoln was a quiet, to himself person, but he is perceived today as strong and one of our most famous presidents. He is attributed with saying, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt." Albert Einstein, one of the most intelligent minds of the early 20th century, was quiet. He is quoted as saying, "The monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind." And I read a quote online that said, "Quiet people have the loudest minds." And I believe that to be true. Being an introvert leaves you alone with your thoughts. Job 6:24 says, "Teach me, and I will hold my tongue, and cause me to understand wherein I have erred." We can learn when we are quiet. Don't you think Lincoln and Einstein picked up a lot of information just observing and listening to others? Although I hated participating, I picked up a lot of useful information listening during those English classes. I was able to hear others' thoughts and interpretations and understandings, not just be fixated on my own. We don't have to verbally fight our battles. The Lord already does that for us. Exodus 14:14 says, "The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace." Silence in battle is a source of strength. I have encountered people who have just completely lost their minds on me and acted a fool, and I didn't even give a response. And it sent them ballistic, and it really crippled them. I typically don't allow people to just yell at me. I worked for a property management company for a while, and people would just call up and start screaming at whoever answered the phone, which was me. And my boss told me not to take that. Either say, "I'm going to hang up on you, and you can feel free to call back when you've calmed down. I will not be screamed at." Or if you choose to take the caller's beratement, when it ended, I could just say, "Do you feel better now?" Either action typically would make the caller check themselves. They knew they were acting inappropriately, and I still do this today. Did you know that when you're in a fight, the first person to speak usually loses or concedes? Sometimes you're in a discussion or a fight and you reach the point where you're silent. There's really nothing left to say about the matter. The first person to speak often backs down because they can't handle the silence. I can hold my peace because I know the Lord is already fighting for me. I don't need to say anything. Psalm 141:3 says, "Set a watch, O Lord, before my mouth, and keep the doors of my lips." Make sure that you choose the words you're going to say correctly, and make sure that the Lord guides them. So I want you to know that there are no awkward silences with the Lord. Have you ever had those awkward silences with someone? And it typically happens in the car with me when I'm driving around with someone I don't know well, and we just run out of things to say. So thank goodness there's a radio to fill those horrible silences. But when you are completely at ease with someone, you don't need to talk. My husband and I can drive for hours on a road trip without speaking, and it's comfortable. It's okay. We are just fine being in each other's presence. That same goes with Jesus. There are no awkward silences with him. We should speak to him and glorify him, but also have those moments where we can just bask in him. Psalm 62, 5-6 in the ESV says, "For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. I can wait in silence for him." When we are silent, God can speak to us. We've heard it over the pulpit several times lately that you can't hear God if you're doing all the talking. It's okay to sit and wait on the Lord sometimes. When I am silent and not distracted, that is when the Lord speaks to me. We perceive God as being this loud, booming voice, but as we read in 1 Kings 19, 11-12, it's not always true. And he said, "Go forth and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent in the mountains and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice." We need to be able to listen to that still small voice. Some people have big, loud energies that precede them. You can feel them coming, so you have no choice but to hear them. But they may not be the voice that you need to hear. Just like the Lord wasn't in the loud wind, earthquake, or fire. Maybe the quiet one who just slips into the pew may be the voice you need to listen to that day. So sit back and wait and listen for that still small voice. And finally, sometimes silent presence is enough. Proverbs 18:13 says, "He that answereth a matter before he heareth is a folly and a shame unto him." So last weekend, my husband was working on some insurance stuff in the office, and he yelled from the other room, "I need your help." I came in to help, not understanding at all what he was talking about, and he didn't like any of my answers, and he didn't want to do what I said or listen to me. So at that point, I just get mad and I walk away. After reflecting on it, I realized he really didn't want my help or my opinion. He was just stressed out and wanted me to just be in the room and stand there for moral support. Sometimes just standing and being silent and being there is what someone needs. Jesus isn't always standing there telling you exactly what to do. Sometimes he's just there helping and guiding you, but he's always with us. As Psalm 139:7 in the ESV says, "Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence?" He is always with us. So to conclude, church, please don't discredit the quiet ones. I gave many points to the benefits of being quiet and silent, and I know that there are quiet warriors amongst us who are mighty, and we just need to be silent for a moment and listen to them. Thinking back to those Mr. Bud years, never would I have thought that I would be asked to speak on a Sunday morning service. But someone in this church took a chance on the quiet girl. I know there are people sitting in the pews now who are just like me, who are labeled as shy or quiet, but they really have a lot to say. And if I'm speaking to you, know, the same spirit that is in you and in me is in the same spirit that is in the most educated, pedigreed, spiritual person. In us is the same Holy Ghost that is in the best evangelist, the best teacher, the best prayer warrior, the best worship leader, the best on and on. Don't ever discredit the quiet ones. And if you are quiet, don't ever discredit yourself. God uses quiet people. I know my worth, I know I'm valuable, and don't ever doubt that about yourself. That same Holy Ghost is in you. Joseph in Matthew 1:20 thought of putting Mary away. He thought. He didn't run around running his mouth. In Matthew 1:24, he doesn't say anything. He just does what God tells him to do and took Mary as his wife. Exodus 4:10 tells us, "And Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither theretofore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue." Moses was quiet. He could barely talk, and God used him in mighty ways. Even the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 10, 1-2 says, I, Paul, myself entreat you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ, I who am humble when face to face with you, but bold toward you when I am away. I beg of you that when I am present, I may not have to show boldness with such confidence as I count on showing against some who suspect us of working according to the flesh. Paul himself acted bolder in his letters than speaking to the early Christians face to face. God will use quiet people. And you know what? I did get an A in that AP English class. That quiet kid showed her worth. And I know there are so many of us quiet ones here today that are working on earning those A's when it comes to our ministry and our relation in the body. Church, let's be quiet and listen to the wisdom that comes from our quiet friends. You may gain a new perspective yourself. Don't ever discredit the quiet ones. God bless.
Good morning. It's so funny. I mean, God is so good. This week, I was like, it's December, thinking Christmas, and I'm like, oh, all these gifts. I had cookie baking this weekend, and then I had a hard week. I'm a nurse, so I had some just really hard situations that I had to deal with, and someone passed, and all these things, and God is so good. Because we just have to get in his presence in those moments. Because how silly to make buying a gift stressful when it's about God. Or I had someone pass. How much more can God be my comforter? So at Friday night prayer, which I can't tell you how many times God has done this for me, especially at Friday night prayer. It is powerful when I'm sitting here and I am overwhelmed and I don't know what else to do with all the things that are surrounding me. And God just comes and gives me his time. He gives me the time of day. And I have that time set aside, and I'm so thankful because he comes to me every time. And so when I was at Friday night prayer, Isaiah 9:6 came to my mind. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. And the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. But I started breaking that down because I don't know, most of us can quote that, right? But I started thinking about government. Government could be our future. Government could be things before us that we can't control, finances. Government can represent so many things, but God has that on his shoulders. Wonderful. He's beyond our comprehension. He's fulfilling. He's our counselor. He hears our complaints. He hears our fears and the things beyond our control. He's the mighty God. He's sovereign. He's the King of Kings. All power and ability is in his hands. The everlasting Father. He never tires. He's all powerful. All ability is in his hands. He is ever with us. And he is the Prince of Peace. Only in him can we have peace, contentment, and a fulfilling life. So my point here is, in this busy season, and when we actually get those quiet moments, if you are a quiet person, maybe you have more of those than I do. But I want to pray about those quiet moments, that we can find quietness in the busyness of the season, that we can truly depend on God in the things that we're facing. So if everyone could stand and come forward, let's cast our cares on God because he cares for you. Oh, Jesus, thank you, God.